The first emergency signal came from Valeth Prime exactly 18 days after the last human transport had left the sector. Chen Lu was monitoring communications from the human fleet when the crystal being's musical voices filled the channel. With panic, Chen had been the human ambassador to the Valeth Empire for 7 years. She knew their language better than most humans, and she could hear the fear behind their normally calm tones. The High Chancellor himself was speaking, which meant the situation was very serious. Human Ambassador Chen Liu, if you are receiving this transmission, we require immediate assistance, the Chancellor sang in the high crystal voice that humans found beautiful but also cold. Our atmospheric processors are experiencing critical failures. Our young cannot survive in the natural atmosphere of our world. Please respond immediately. Chen looked at the message timestamp. The Valeth had been trying to reach her for 6 hours. She could imagine the panic growing in their crystal cities as the air systems that kept their children alive began to shut down one by one. The irony was not lost on her. For 50 years, the Valeth had treated humans like clever animals, who could fix things but could not think for themselves. They had never bothered to learn how their own machines worked. They just gave orders and expected humans to make everything work perfectly. Now those same machines were dying, and the Valeth had no idea how to save them. Chen was sitting in the communications center of the flagship Liberty when Admiral Kate Sullivan came to check the reports. Kate was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had been commanding human fleets longer than Chen had been alive. She read the Valeth distress call without showing any emotion. "How bad is it?" Kate asked. "Bad," Chen replied. The atmospheric processors on Valeth Prime were designed by human engineers 30 years ago. The Valeth never learned how they work. Without human maintenance teams, the quantum field generators are becoming unstable. If they fail completely, the artificial atmosphere will collapse and their cities will become uninhabitable. Kate nodded slowly. "What about the other powers?" Chen pulled up more displays showing messages from across the galaxy. The Nexari are in even worse trouble. Their space habitats are losing pressure. The gas beings need very specific atmospheric conditions to survive, and their life support systems are failing. They've lost 3 orbital cities already. And the Korhan? Their weapons platforms are shutting down, Chen said. The proud warriors who conquered half the galaxy can't even power their own guns anymore. Their fusion reactors are going into emergency lockdown because the human-designed safety systems think they're being tampered with. Sarah Blake entered the communications center carrying a data pad filled with more reports. Sarah was the fleet's intelligence officer, and she had been tracking the cascade of failures spreading across the galaxy like a plague. "Admiral, we're receiving over 15,000 distress calls per hour now," Sarah reported. "Every major world is reporting critical system failures. The quantum communication network is shutting down sector by sector. Trade routes are closing as the navigation beacons go dark. It's like watching a house of cards collapse." Kate took the data pad and scrolled through the reports. Each one told the same story. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades were suddenly developing mysterious problems. Machines that had never failed before were shutting down for no apparent reason. The aliens' best technicians could not figure out what was wrong. The genius of humanity's approach was becoming clear. They had not sabotaged anything in the traditional sense. They had simply built everything to require human knowledge for continued operation. Every system had layers of complexity that only human minds fully understood. Every machine had authorization codes that only human computers could provide. "Sir," called Ben Taylor from his station. "We have an urgent message from the Nexari Central Authority. They're offering us anything we want if we come back and fix their life support systems. Technology, territory, resources, anything." Kate walked over to Ben's station and listened to the message. The musical tones of the gas beings were distorted by desperation. The same creatures who had called humans useful but limited were now begging for human help. "They're all begging now," observed Commander Mike Stevens, who had just arrived from the tactical department. The proud Korhan Empire sent a message offering to make humans equal partners in their government. The Valeth are promising to share their crystal-growing technology. The Nexari want to teach us their fold space secrets. Chen had seen this pattern before in human history. When powerful groups became dependent on others, They always made grand promises when that support was threatened. But history also showed that those promises were forgotten as soon as the crisis passed. "What are our options?" Kate asked the assembled officers. Sarah consulted her datapad. "We could return as partners instead of servants. All three powers are desperate enough to agree to almost any terms right now. We would have significant leverage to negotiate better conditions for humanity." "Or?" Kate prompted. "Or we continue with the original plan," Chen said. "Let the old order collapse completely and build something new from the ground up." The room was quiet as everyone considered the implications. Going back would mean accepting that the galaxy would never really change. The aliens would remember their dependence on humans and eventually find ways to reduce that dependence. History would repeat itself with humanity in chains again. But letting the old order collapse meant watching billions die as their life support systems failed. It meant seeing ancient civilizations crumble into dust. It meant taking responsibility for the chaos that would follow. "How long do they have?" Kate asked. Chen checked her calculations. "The Nexari habitat failures are accelerating. They'll lose 50% of their population within 2 months if nothing changes. The Veilith can evacuate their young to other worlds, but those worlds are having their own problems. The Korhan military is already fractured as their ships lose power and become stranded. And the other species they've been ruling? That's the interesting part," Sarah said. "The subject species are actually doing better than their masters. Many of them have been maintaining their own basic systems all along. The collapse is hitting the ruling classes hardest because they're the ones who became completely dependent on human labor." Kate walked back to the main display and stared at the galaxy map. Red warning indicators were spreading like infection across every sector. Each light represented millions of lives hanging in the balance. "Admiral," said a new voice from the communication station, "we have a priority message from Earth Command." Kate activated the secure channel and listened to the coded message from home. When it finished, she stood quietly for a long moment before speaking. "Earth Command has confirmed reports from our deep space scouts," she announced. "We've found something that changes everything. Captain Rogers discovered ruins in the outer rim. Lots of ruins. Dozens of extinct civilizations that all follow the same pattern. They rose to power, subjugated other species to do their work, then collapsed when they lost the ability to maintain their own technology. The implications hit everyone at once. This was not the first time something like this had happened. The galaxy had been through this cycle many times before. The current great powers were just the latest in a long line of civilizations that had made themselves too dependent on others. "So we have 3 choices," Kate continued. "Go back and restart the cycle. Let them all die and leave empty space, or try something completely different." "What's the third option?" Chen asked. Kate smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "We build something better, something that's never been tried before. A galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of domination, partnership instead of servitude." The bridge fell silent as everyone considered this possibility. It was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. It would mean taking responsibility not just for human survival, but for the future of the entire galaxy. "The question is," Kate said, looking around at her officers, "do we have the courage to try?" Ben Taylor was the first to speak. "The distress calls are still coming in, Admiral. Whatever we decide, we need to decide quickly. The galaxy is falling apart faster than anyone expected." Kate looked at the display showing the cascade of failures spreading across known space. Every red light represented a crisis that would soon become a catastrophe. Every failed system brought them closer to the point where the damage would be irreversible. But somewhere in that chaos was an opportunity. A chance to build something better than anything the galaxy had ever seen. A chance to prove that cooperation was stronger than conquest, that diversity was better than domination. The old powers had ruled through fear and strength. They had crushed innovation and creativity in favor of control and stability. Now their weakness was exposed, and humanity had the chance to show the galaxy a different way. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Kate ordered. "Begin Phase 2 of the operation. It's time to build something new." 2 months after humanity's departure, the galaxy was dying. Emma Foster sat in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery, analyzing the reports that streamed in from across known space. The data was worse than anyone had predicted. Emma had been the head of the Galactic Infrastructure Analysis Project for 8 years. Her job had been to study how all the different alien technologies worked together to keep civilization running. Now she was watching that same civilization collapse in real time. The numbers on her screen told a story of catastrophic failure. The Nexari Collective had lost 4 billion lives when their atmospheric systems failed in a cascade of explosions that tore through their orbital habitats. The proud gas beings who had ruled 3 sectors of space were now refugees fleeing in whatever ship still had power. The environmental controls on Valith Prime finally gave out yesterday, reported Dr. Amy Watson from the next station over. Amy had specialized in crystal being technology, and her voice was flat with exhaustion. The artificial atmosphere they needed to keep their cities habitable has completely collapsed. They're evacuating the entire planet. Emma looked at the holographic display floating between them. It showed Valith Prime as a dying world surrounded by a cloud of evacuation ships. The crystal beings' beautiful cities were cracking apart as the temperature and pressure changed beyond what their architecture could handle. "Where are they going?" Emma asked. "Nowhere good," Amy replied. "The other Valith worlds are having their own problems. The quantum field generators that maintain their gravity are shutting down. Some planets are becoming too heavy to live on. Others are losing gravity entirely." Captain Mike Stevens entered the laboratory carrying fresh reports from the communications center. Mike had been monitoring emergency channels for weeks and the stress was showing on his face. He looked like he had not slept in days. "The Korhan Federation is officially broken," Mike announced. "Their last functioning war fleet just went dark near the Centauri Nebula. Without power for their engines or life support, they're drifting, in space waiting to die." Emma felt a chill despite the warm air in the laboratory. The Korhan had been the galaxy's strongest military power for over 2,000 years. Their warriors had conquered dozens of species and claimed dominion over hundreds of star systems. Now they were helpless without the human engineers who had maintained their weapons and ships. "How many survivors overall?" Emma asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. Mike consulted his data pad. Best estimates put the death toll at over 12 billion so far. The Nexari lost most of their population when their habitats exploded. The Valith are evacuating, but they don't have anywhere safe to go. The Korhan are scattered across space in disabled ships. Amy pulled up another display showing the breakdown of different types of system failures. It's not just the big 3 powers. The transportation network that connected the galaxy has completely collapsed. Trade ships are stranded between stars. Colony worlds that depended on imported food and supplies are facing starvation. Emma studied the cascade analysis that showed how each failure led to more failures. When the quantum communication networks went down, coordination became impossible. When the power grids failed, life support systems shut down. When the transportation hubs lost power, food and medicine could not reach the people who needed them. The scope of the disaster was beyond anything in galactic history. Entire civilizations that had existed for thousands of years were disappearing in a matter of months. Ancient cultures were becoming extinct as their worlds became uninhabitable. "There's something else," Mike said quietly. "We're getting reports from the subject species, the ones who were enslaved by the great powers." "What kind of reports?" Emma asked. "They're organizing," Mike replied. "Without the Korhan military to suppress them, the Zephyrians have declared independence. The crystalloids are forming their own government. The voidlings are claiming their home systems back." Amy looked up from her displays. "That makes sense. The subject species never became completely dependent on human labor like their masters did. They've been maintaining their own basic systems all along. The collapse is hitting the ruling classes hardest because they forgot how to do anything for themselves." Emma felt a strange mix of horror and hope. The death toll was catastrophic and would likely get much worse before it stabilized. But something new was emerging from the chaos. Species that had been oppressed for centuries were finally free to determine their own futures. "Captain Morrison wants to see the final analysis," Mike said. Admiral Sullivan is making her decision about Phase 3 based on our recommendations. Emma looked at the data one more time before compiling her final report. The old galactic order was not just damaged, it was completely destroyed. The three great powers would never recover their former strength, even if humanity returned tomorrow. Too much infrastructure was permanently damaged. Too many people were dead. Too much knowledge had been lost. But the galaxy itself would survive. The younger species who had been held down by the old powers were already proving they could manage their own affairs. Some were even reaching out to each other, forming alliances and partnerships that had been impossible under the previous system. "My recommendation is clear," Emma announced. "The old order cannot be restored. We can try to help the survivors, but we cannot bring back what has been lost. The question is whether we try to become the new galactic rulers, or whether we help build something completely different." Amy nodded in agreement. The data supports cooperation over domination. Every time one species has tried to rule the galaxy, the result has been stagnation and eventual collapse. Maybe it's time to try something new. Mike activated his communicator. "Captain Morrison, Dr. Foster has the final analysis ready for transmission to Fleet Command." While they waited for the secure connection to be established, Emma thought about the weight of the decision humanity was facing. They had not intended to become responsible for the fate of the galaxy. They had just wanted to be free from slavery, but history had put them in a position where their choices would determine the future of billions of intelligent beings. The communication channel opened, and Jake Morrison's voice came through clearly. "Dr. Foster, what's your assessment of the situation?" "The old galactic order is finished," Emma reported. "The infrastructure damage is too extensive to repair. The population losses are too severe to recover from. The knowledge base required to maintain their technology has been permanently lost. Even if we returned tomorrow and worked around the clock, we could not restore what existed before." "What about alternatives?" Jake asked. "The younger species are already organizing themselves," Emma continued. "They have the basic skills needed to maintain civilization at a reduced level. With human assistance, they could rebuild into something more stable and sustainable than what came before." There was a long pause before Jake responded. "And if we don't help them? Then the galaxy enters a dark age that could last thousands of years," Emma replied honestly. "Science and technology would be lost. Interstellar civilization would collapse completely. Eventually, some species would rediscover spaceflight, but they would be starting over from almost nothing." "Thank you, Dr. Foster. Transmit your full report to Admiral Sullivan. She needs to make the final decision within the next 6 hours." The communication ended, and the laboratory fell quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Emma looked out the viewport at the stars and wondered what they would look like in 100 years. Would they shine on a galaxy rebuilt through cooperation and mutual respect? Or would they light empty space where great civilizations had once flourished? Amy broke the silence. "Do you think we did the right thing, leaving them to collapse like this?" Emma considered the question carefully. "We didn't have a choice. If we had stayed as slaves, nothing would have changed. The cycle would have continued, with humanity just another oppressed species. At least this way there's a chance for something better. But so many died," Amy said softly. "And many more will die if we don't act quickly," Emma replied. "The collapse is still accelerating, but we've also given the galaxy its first real chance for freedom in thousands of years. Whether that chance is worth the cost depends on what we build from the ruins." Mike was reading new reports from the communications center. "Admiral Sullivan has made her decision. All fleet commanders are being briefed on Phase 3. We're not going back to the old system, and we're not walking away from the chaos. We're going to try building something completely new." Emma felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. Humanity was about to attempt something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of conquering or abandoning the galaxy, they were going to try to heal it. The outcome would determine whether their species was remembered as liberators or destroyers. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of the small beings who traveled between them. But those same stars had watched the rise and fall of dozens of galactic civilizations. Perhaps they would witness the birth of something better than anything that had come before. The reckoning was complete. Now came the real test of human character. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the main briefing room of the flagship Liberty, looking at the largest holographic display she had ever seen. It showed the entire galaxy with thousands of points of light representing worlds, stations, and fleets. Most of those lights were red, indicating systems in crisis or complete failure. But scattered throughout the darkness were new blue lights that had not been there 6 months ago. Those blue lights represented humanity's new project. Instead of returning to serve the dying alien empires, human fleets had begun the most ambitious construction program in galactic history. They were building a completely new infrastructure that would bypass the collapsing old order entirely. Tom Bradley, the chief engineer of the Reconstruction project, was pointing to clusters of blue lights near the galactic rim. The first phase is complete, Admiral. We have established 12 major hub stations in previously empty space. Each hub can support up to 50 million people and serve as a center for trade, research, and manufacturing. Kate studied the display with satisfaction. The hubs were positioned to be accessible to the surviving populations of multiple species, while being far enough from the old power centers to avoid the worst of the chaos. Each hub was designed using the latest human engineering combined with the best ideas from alien cultures. What about the transportation network? Kate asked. Ahead of schedule, Tom replied with obvious pride. Our new quantum tunnel system is 40% more efficient than anything the old empires ever built. Instead of depending on massive central facilities that could fail catastrophically, we've created a distributed network that can route around damage automatically. Amy Watson joined them at the display, carrying reports from the research teams. Amy had been working with alien scientists from a dozen different species to solve problems that had never been attempted before. The breakthrough came from the Zephyrians, Amy announced. Their natural ability to perceive quantum fluctuations allowed them to see inefficiencies in our tunnel design that we never would have noticed. With their help, we can move ships across the galaxy using 30% less power than the old Corhan network ever required. Kate nodded approvingly. This was exactly what she had hoped to achieve. Instead of humans doing all the work while others gave orders, every species was contributing their unique abilities to solve shared problems. The results were exceeding all expectations. Captain Steve Rogers entered the briefing room with news from the deep space exploration fleets. Steve had been leading survey missions to the outer regions of the galaxy, mapping ruins and looking for resources that could support the reconstruction effort. Admiral, we found something incredible in the Andromeda approach, Steve reported. An intact alien archive from a civilization that died out about 50,000 years ago. The data storage is still functional and it contains engineering techniques that predate anything we've seen before. What kind of techniques? Tom asked, his engineer's curiosity obvious. Stellar engineering, Steve replied. These people knew how to modify stars to produce specific types of energy. They could create artificial solar systems tailored to the needs of different species. The possibilities are amazing. Amy was already pulling up preliminary analysis of the ancient data. If we can adapt these techniques to modern technology, we could solve the energy crisis that's been holding back Reconstruction. Instead of depending on fusion plants that require rare materials, we could power entire sectors using modified stars. Kate felt a thrill of excitement. This was what made the new paradigm different from everything that had come before. Instead of hoarding knowledge and using it to control others, humanity was sharing discoveries and building on the contributions of every species they encountered. Status report on the refugee settlements? Kate asked. Better than expected, replied Commander Lisa Chang, who had just arrived from the Humanitarian Coordination Center. We have successfully relocated over 200 million survivors from the collapsed empires. Most are adapting well to the cooperative model we've established in the hub stations. Any problems with integration? Kate asked. Some initial resistance. From former Corhan military officers who expect to command others, Lisa admitted. But most survivors are grateful just to be alive and safe. The Nexari gas beings have been particularly helpful. Their natural empathy makes them excellent mediators when conflicts arise between different species. Tom was updating the display to show the progress of construction projects throughout human space. We're not just rebuilding what was lost, Admiral. We're creating something completely new. The hub stations are already centers of innovation and cultural exchange. Art, music, literature, and scientific discoveries are flowing between species in ways that never happened under the old system. Amy brought up examples of the cultural renaissance that was emerging. The crystalloids' mathematical abilities, combined with human engineering, have produced architectural designs of incredible beauty and efficiency. Zephyrian artists working with human musicians have created entirely new forms of music. The exchange of ideas is accelerating innovation at an unprecedented rate. Kate walked around the display, studying the growing network of blue lights that represented humanity's new galactic civilization. It was smaller than what the old empires had controlled, but it was also more dynamic and creative. Every world was contributing something unique to the whole. "What about the holdout populations?" Kate asked. "The ones who refused to join the new system?" Steve consulted his survey reports. "Most are struggling to survive without the infrastructure they depended on. A few Korhan strongholds are trying to maintain their military traditions, but they're running out of supplies. Some Violith crystal cities are attempting to recreate their old atmospheric systems, but they lack the technical knowledge to succeed." "Do they pose a threat to our operations?" Kate asked. "Not really," Lisa replied. "They're too busy trying to survive to cause problems for anyone else. Most of their populations are slowly migrating to our hub stations as conditions in their home territories become impossible." Tom highlighted a section of the galaxy where several species were working together on a massive project. "This is the most ambitious part of the Reconstruction, Admiral. The former subject species have formed a coalition to build something they're calling the Great Library. It will be a repository of all knowledge from every civilization in galactic history." "Including the civilizations that collapsed?" Kate asked. "Especially those," Amy confirmed. "We're analyzing the ruins that Captain Rogers has been finding and adding their discoveries to the archive. The goal is to preserve the wisdom of the past while avoiding the mistakes that led to collapse." Kate studied the display showing the Great Library project. It was being built in neutral space with contributions from dozens of species. Human engineers were working alongside Zephyrian artists, crystalloid mathematicians, and representatives from species that had been enemies for thousands of years. "This is what I hoped we could achieve," Kate said quietly. "Not human dominance replacing alien dominance, but genuine cooperation between equals." "The results speak for themselves," Tom observed. "In 6 months we've achieved technological advances that surpassed anything the old empires accomplished in centuries. When every species contributes freely instead of being forced to serve, innovation flourishes." A communication alert sounded and Ben Taylor's voice came over the intercom. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. They want an immediate status report on the Reconstruction project." Kate activated the secure channel and listened to the message from home. When it finished, she smiled for the first time in weeks. "Earth Command is impressed with our progress," she announced to the assembled officers. "They're authorizing Phase 4 of the operation. We're going to expand the hub network into the core systems of the galaxy. The implications hit everyone immediately. Phase 4 meant moving beyond the safe zones on the galactic rim and establishing human-led cooperative settlements in the heart of the old galactic powers. It was ambitious and risky, but it was also necessary if they wanted to truly transform galactic civilization. "How long until we can begin Phase 4? Kate asked. "The infrastructure will be ready in 3 months, Tom replied, "but we'll need volunteers willing to establish settlements in potentially dangerous territory. The core systems are still unstable, and there could be hostile survivors from the old regimes." "I'll lead the first expedition myself," Steve volunteered. "Immediately. My deep space teams have the most experience operating in dangerous territory." Kate looked around at her officers and saw the same determination she felt herself. They had come too far to stop now. The galaxy was being reborn through cooperation and mutual respect, but the job was far from finished. They needed to prove that the new paradigm could work even in the most challenging circumstances. "Begin preparations for Phase 4, Kate ordered. It's time to bring our vision of cooperation to the entire galaxy. Outside the viewports of the Liberty, the stars shone with the same light they had always cast. But the civilizations that lived among those stars were changing in ways that had never been attempted before. The age of conquest and domination was ending. 5 years had passed since humanity's departure from servitude, and Jake Morrison could barely recognize the galaxy he now saw from the observation deck of the exploration vessel New Dawn, where once there had been the rigid territories of 3 great empires. Now there was a vibrant network of cooperative settlements that stretched across known space. The transformation was more complete than anyone had dared to hope. The old empire boundaries had dissolved completely, replaced by voluntary associations of species working together for mutual benefit. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had been enemies for centuries. Scientific knowledge was shared openly, instead of being hoarded as a source of power. Dr. Dan Cooper joined Jake at the observation window, carrying the latest reports from the Galactic Development Council. Dan had been appointed as humanity's chief representative to the new galactic government, a position that would have been impossible under the old system where humans were considered servant animals. "The statistics are remarkable," Dan announced, with obvious satisfaction. "In 5 years, we have made more scientific advances than the previous 1,000 years combined. When every species contributes their unique abilities instead of being forced into submission, the rate of progress is exponential." Jake studied the data Dan was showing him. New technologies were being developed at an incredible pace. Medical treatments that combined human knowledge with alien biology were eliminating diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Engineering techniques that merged different species approaches were creating structures of unprecedented efficiency and beauty. "What about the Great Library Project?" Jake asked. "Completed last month," Dan replied with pride. "Every piece of knowledge from every known civilization is now preserved and accessible to everyone." The Zephyrians contributed their memory techniques, the crystalloids provided mathematical frameworks, and humans developed the interface systems. It represents the combined wisdom of 2 million years of galactic history. Admiral Kate Sullivan entered the observation area, looking younger and more relaxed than Jake had seen her in decades. The stress of managing a galaxy-wide crisis had been replaced by the satisfaction of watching a new civilization flourish. "President Miller wants the final report on galactic reconstruction," Kate announced. "The Earth Council needs to decide our long-term role in galactic affairs." Jake nodded. President Karen Miller had been elected to lead humanity's participation in galactic government, another development that would have been unthinkable under the old system. For the first time in galactic history, leadership was based on merit and consensus rather than military power or ancient privilege. "The numbers tell the story," Dan said, activating a holographic display that filled the space between them. "We now have over 300 cooperative settlements throughout the galaxy. Each one is self-governing but connected to the others through voluntary association. No species dominates any other. Every world contributes what it can and receives what it needs." The display showed trade routes that had never existed before, connecting species that had been isolated or oppressed under the old empires. Cultural exchange was flourishing as art, music, literature, and philosophy flowed freely between worlds. Scientific collaboration was producing discoveries that no single species could have achieved alone. "What about the former empire populations?" Kate asked. "The survivors who refused to join the cooperative system?" "Most have eventually integrated," Dan replied. "The Korhan military holdouts finally abandoned their strongholds when their last fusion reactors failed. The Valeth crystal cities that tried to maintain isolation gradually emptied as their young people migrated to the cooperative settlements. The Nexari survivors had no choice but to accept help when their remaining habitats became uninhabitable." Jake looked at the section of the display showing the former empire homeworlds. Most were being slowly restored through cooperative terraforming projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Instead of each species hoarding their environmental technologies, they were combining their knowledge to heal worlds damaged by centuries of exploitation. "The integration process has been mostly successful," Dan continued. "Former Empire citizens who join the cooperative settlements are given equal status and opportunities. Many have become valuable contributors to Reconstruction projects. The key was showing them that cooperation produces better results than domination. Captain Amy Watson's voice came over the communication system. Admiral Sullivan, we have incoming messages from the Andromeda contact mission. Captain Rogers reports successful first contact with 3 new species beyond the galactic rim. Kate activated the display to show the messages from Steve Rogers' Deep Space Fleet. The exploration missions that had been launched 2 years ago were making contact with civilizations that had never been reached by the old empires. This is potentially the most important development yet, Kate observed as she read Steve's reports. If we can establish cooperative relationships with species beyond our galaxy, we prove that the new paradigm can work on an intergalactic scale. The messages from Steve's fleet described 3 species with radically different biologies and technologies. One was a collective consciousness that existed in multiple dimensions. Another was a machine intelligence that had evolved from ancient automated systems. The third was an energy-based life form that lived inside stars themselves. All 3 species have expressed interest in joining the cooperative network, Dan reported with excitement. They've been monitoring our galaxy for centuries and they're impressed by the transformation we've achieved. This could be the beginning of an intergalactic cooperative civilization. Jake felt a surge of pride and wonder. Humanity had started this journey as escaped slaves trying to avoid servitude. Now they were helping to create something that could span multiple galaxies and include forms of life that had never been imagined before. Communications Officer Ben Taylor joined them with updates from across the cooperative network. Sir, we're receiving celebration messages from over 1,000 worlds. Today marks the 5th anniversary of the Galactic Renaissance, and everyone wants to participate in the commemoration. Kate smiled as she read the messages. Schedule a galaxy-wide conference call. President Miller will want to address the entire cooperative network on this anniversary. While they waited for the communication links to be established, Jake reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. 5 years ago, the galaxy had been ruled by 3 ancient empires that crushed innovation and oppressed billions of intelligent beings. Now those same beings were working together to create wonders that surpassed anything in galactic history. The transformation had not been without cost. Billions had died during the collapse of the old order. Ancient civilizations had been lost forever. The galaxy bore scars that would take centuries to heal completely. But from that destruction had emerged something beautiful and unprecedented. Galaxy-wide communication link established, Ben announced. All cooperative settlements are online and ready to receive President Miller's address. Kate activated the main display, and President Miller's image appeared, broadcasting simultaneously to hundreds of worlds throughout the galaxy. Behind her was the flag of the Human Federation, but surrounding it were the symbols of every species in the cooperative network. Citizens of the galaxy, President Miller began. Today we celebrate not the dominance of one species over others, but the triumph of cooperation over conquest. 5 years ago, humanity chose to walk away from servitude rather than submit to slavery. That decision led to the collapse of ancient empires, but it also gave birth to something unprecedented in galactic history. The display showed images from across the cooperative network. Humans working alongside Zephyrians to design new forms of architecture. Crystalloids collaborating with former Nexari refugees to develop better life support systems. Species that had been enemies for millennia now sharing knowledge and resources for the common good. We offer every species the same thing we wanted for ourselves, Miller continued. The freedom to reach your full potential. The opportunity to contribute your unique gifts to the galactic community. The assurance that no one will be enslaved or oppressed for the benefit of others. Jake watched the responses flooding in from worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had never known freedom were celebrating their liberation. Civilizations that had been stagnant for centuries were experiencing cultural and technological renaissance. The cooperative network was not just surviving, it was thriving beyond all expectations. The galaxy we are building together is based on a simple principle, Miller concluded. Every species has something valuable to contribute. Every world has the right to determine its own future. Every being deserves the opportunity to reach the stars. As the broadcast ended, Jake looked out at the stars with a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with humanity's desperate flight from slavery had ended with the liberation of the entire galaxy. The old cycle of conquest and collapse had been broken forever. "What do you think comes next?" Kate asked. Dan consulted his reports from the deep space missions. "Captain Rogers believes there are dozens of galaxies within reach of our new transportation technology." Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his ship and watched the last human transport disappear into the darkness of space. The New Horizons was quiet now, except for the soft hum of the engines. His crew moved around him like shadows, preparing for what would happen next. Jake had been a ship captain for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this before. The message had come 3 months ago from the Galactic Council. It was simple and clear like a knife cut. Humans would work for the galaxy or humans would die. There was no third choice. The 3 big alien powers had spoken together for the first time in 1,000 years, and they all agreed on one thing. Humans were good workers and they would stay workers forever. Jake remembered the day 50 years ago when humans first left Earth and found other worlds. They had been so happy to meet alien races and learn about the galaxy. The Valeth Empire had crystal beings that looked like living jewels. The Nexari Collective lived in gas clouds and spoke in musical tones. The Korhan Federation were ancient, warriors with ships bigger than cities. All of them seemed so wise and powerful, but wisdom and power had made them lazy. Jake had seen it with his own eyes during his years flying between the stars. The Crystal Valeth could not fix their own machines. The Gas Nexari could not build their own homes. The warrior Korhan could not even repair their own weapons. They had been using other races to do their work for so long that they forgot how to do it themselves. Lisa Parker walked up to Jake and stood beside him at the window. She was the best scientist on the ship, and maybe the smartest human Jake had ever met. Lisa had spent the last 5 years studying how the galaxy really worked. What she found had changed everything. "The numbers are final," Lisa said in her quiet voice. "Every major system in this galaxy depends on human hands and human minds. The quantum networks that let them talk across space. The fusion plants that power their worlds. The life support systems that keep billions alive. We built it all and we maintain it all." Jake nodded. He had read Lisa's reports. Humans had become the backbone of galactic civilization without anyone noticing. When the aliens gave orders, humans made those orders real. When alien machines broke down, humans fixed them. When alien plans failed, humans made them work anyway. Alex Rodriguez came up behind them. He was Jake's first officer and best friend. They had served together on 5 different ships over 15 years. Alex looked tired, but his eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement. "The last transport just jumped to fold. Space," Alex said. "Captain Williams reports all systems green. They should reach the rendezvous point in 6 days." Jake looked out at the empty space where thousands of human ships had been just minutes before. The evacuation had taken 2 months to organize and 3 weeks to complete. Every human settlement in the galaxy had been emptied. Every human worker had been recalled. Every human family had packed up their lives and left. The aliens thought humans were running away in fear. They were wrong. Lisa touched a control panel and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed the galaxy as a web of light with bright points marking important worlds and systems. Red lines connected everything like blood vessels in a living body. "Every red line represents something humans built or maintain," Lisa explained. "Take away the red lines and you take away the galaxy as they know it." Jake studied the hologram. The red lines were everywhere. They connected every major world to every other major world. They powered the big cities and the space stations. They controlled the weather machines and the gravity generators. Without the red lines, the galaxy would go dark. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "The automated systems will keep running for about 3 weeks," Lisa answered. "After that, small problems will become big problems. After 2 months, major systems will start shutting down. After 6 months, She did not finish the sentence, but Jake understood. Alex was looking at another display that showed messages coming in from across the galaxy. The alien governments were already sending demands for humans to return. Some messages promised rewards. Others threatened punishment. All of them assumed that humans would come back like obedient dogs. "Sir," said Ben Taylor from the communication station, "we have incoming messages from the Valith High Command, the Nexari Central Authority, and the Korhan War Council. They all want immediate responses." Jake walked over to Ben's station and looked at the messages. The Valith were polite but firm. The Nexari were confused and worried. The Korhan were angry and threatening. None of them understood what was really happening. "Send the same reply to all of them," Jake ordered. "Tell them that humanity thanks them for their years of cooperation, but we have decided to pursue our own path among the stars. We wish them well in their future endeavors." Ben looked surprised. "That's it?" "That's it," Jake confirmed. "Keep it simple and polite. No explanations, no arguments, no negotiations." The truth was that the Earth Council had been planning this moment for 5 years. Ever since the first hints that the alien powers wanted to make human servitude official and permanent. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Humans would not fight the aliens. Humans would not argue with them. Humans would simply leave, but they would not leave empty-handed. Every piece of human technology contained something special. Not a virus or a weapon, but something much more subtle. A small piece of code that checked for human authorization signals. If those signals stopped coming, the technology would gradually shut itself down. Jake had helped design some of those authorization systems during his years as a military engineer before becoming a ship captain. The beauty was that the aliens would never find them. The code was written in human languages using human logic patterns. Even if the aliens suspected sabotage, they would not know where to look or what to look for. "Time to go," Jake announced, to his crew. "Set course for Kepler Station. Maximum fold speed." As the New Horizons prepared to jump into fold space, Jake took one last look at the sector they were leaving behind. In a few hours, the first authorization signals would start timing out. In a few days, the first systems would start developing mysterious problems. In a few weeks, the galaxy would begin to understand what it meant to lose humanity. The 3 great alien powers had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through strength and intimidation. They had crushed dozens of younger races and turned them into servants or slaves. They thought humans would be just another conquered species in their collection. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Humans had not conquered the galaxy through war. They had made themselves indispensable through skill and knowledge. Now they were taking that knowledge away, and the galaxy would never be the same. Jake smiled as his ship jumped to fold space. The revolution had begun, and the aliens had not fired a single shot to stop it. They could not stop something they did not even understand. By the time they figured out what was happening, it would be far too late to change anything. The age of human servitude was over. What came next would be up to humanity to decide.